The biggest problem with Christianity. I know what my problem is. Do you know what yours is? I bet I do. In the third chapter of the book of Daniel, we have a story about three teenagers. I love working with teenagers. I've done it for years and years. And these three teenagers, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were told by the king, King Nebuchadnezzar, that they better bow down to this statue he had fashioned, this golden idol that he made to look like himself because he thought he really looked good, you know. So he says, you need to bow down. Now, he didn't tell them they had to sacrifice their firstborn. He didn't tell them that they had to jump off a bridge or a cliff. He told them to bow down to this idol. Not that big of a deal to most people, but these people were believers in the one true God. So as a result, they said, no, we're not going to do it. We're not going to bow down to this idol that you've given us to bow to. So I love how the story goes. He calls them in, he has them brought in, and he gets all in their face and wants to know why they won't bow down to his idol. Why won't they do this? Why won't they do what I tell them to do? Teenagers said, listen, you're not my dad. I don't have to tell you anything. Said, we don't have to answer you at all if we don't want to, but we will say that we're not going to bow. We serve the one true God, and we're not going to bow down to your idol. We're not going to do what you say to do. Well, I guess you will. And he shows them a fiery furnace. This thing was so white hot that whenever the door of the furnace was opened, it killed the one who opened the door. Look, he got as visual as he could get with them about what's going to happen to them if they didn't do what he said do. And they said something that grabs me by the heart and just squeezes my heart. They said, listen, we believe that our God's going to take care of us, but even if he doesn't, Daniel chapter 3, verse 18. Even if he doesn't, we still won't bow down. He said, fine, let's get that fiery furnace hot. Let's get it hotter than it's ever been. And he gets the thing hot and he takes them and he throws them in there. And he's expecting them just to incinerate, just, and be gone. It's so hot and fiery. But something happens. He looks up in the fiery furnace and he's thinking, wait a minute. Something's going on in there. And I don't know what these guys were probably doing in there. I imagine, okay, they're teenagers. They're probably in there playing, okay, who wants to scare Nebuchadnezzar first? Let's do paper, rock, scissors. I don't know what they were doing. Can you imagine being in the fiery furnace going, wow, I'm not burning. It wasn't worth them giving up their faith, their integrity. Why? Oh, by the way, Nebuchadnezzar also saw a fourth one in there. We get the first glimpse, I believe, or one of the first glimpses we have in the Old Testament of the physical Christ. Why did they have that kind of faith? How do I have the kind of faith that I can walk through life? Because the problem's not Sunday morning. The problem is Tuesday afternoon, Thursday morning, Saturday night. How do I walk through my everyday life in a way that is pleasing? Don and Chris they've been telling us about discipline being, coming from passion, coming from a joyful place, not one of dread and discouragement, and if you haven't seen that podcast, you need to go see it. It's something to think about whenever we realize we can have the faith that those three teenagers had. We can live in that kind of freedom in our Christian walk. But whenever we start talking about a Christian walk, we start seeing the small picture. That's the problem with Christianity. We see the small picture. We see the things that are right around us in front of us, and we don't see the big picture. We see the fiery furnace. We don't see the fact that we will have an encounter with God. 2 weeks ago, I went on a vacation with my wife. Went to a theme park. I love theme parks. Love them. I love the rides. I love everything about it. I love her. And we're walking through these theme parks starting early in the morning. One morning at 5:30 in the morning, we were already in the theme park. Some nights we were after midnight getting back to our room. And I would notice when I would get back to the room that my feet were so tired. My ankles I already have problems with were just banging. But I didn't notice it so much whenever I'm on a roller coaster. I didn't notice it so much when I'm holding her hand walking down Main Street. Why? Because in those moments, I'm seeing the big picture. I'm seeing the time that I'm spending with her as being invaluable, making memories. We're taking photos and we're talking about our future with our grandchildren that we'll have one day. And I'm looking at her and realizing that I've been with her married now for 27 years. And we're talking and we're immersed in things that are beyond my feet. It's interesting that I noticed my feet hurting more at the first of the week. By the end of the week, they still hurt, not quite so bad. And I also noticed them hurting worse when I would stop, when I would lay down, when I would give up my day and say, okay, I'm done with today. There are people all around us that will say, well, I got a disability. I have, a mental disability. I'm physically limited. I have all of these things I can't do. It's not about doing. It's about being. It's not about what I can't do. It's about the things that God has for me in store that He wants me to do. Sometimes we have to wait and see the big picture because what's right in front of us many, many times will discourage us. There's a passage of scripture in the 7th chapter of the book of Acts where Deacon Stephen is he's preaching and he is letting it go, man. I mean, he is just, and he's driving home the truth of the gospel of Christ to a bunch of religious Pharisees. Go figure. And there's a whole lot more to the story that I could spend a lot of time on. But what I want to focus on is they get enough of it and they put their hands on their ears and they're like, we're not listening to you anymore. We're done. We're not going to hear any more that you have to say. And they begin to stone him. They're throwing stones at him. And in verse 55, Stephen looks up and he sees the bigger picture. He sees Jesus standing at the right hand of the Father. You find Jesus all throughout Scripture being at the right hand of the Father seated, but in this case, he's standing up. I think that's cool too. But he looks up and he sees him and he says, I see Jesus. I see Jesus. He doesn't see the stones. He doesn't see the mad faces of the Pharisees he doesn't see the small picture. And he's been living his life. He's been trying to grow as a believer. He's gotten strong in his faith. Like my feet, by the end of the week, were getting stronger. He's gotten strong in his faith, strong enough to see beyond the stones and to see the face of Jesus. I'm walking through the theme park and I'm holding Tammy's hand. This crowd is coming against us. There are just people everywhere. And I've got her and she's walking behind me and I'm holding her hand and she's following me through the crowd. And I'm thinking, man, I'm getting sick of all these people coming straight at me. And I look behind me and not only do I see her, but I see a whole line of people behind her. And we're all snaking through the crowd. Why? Because I was going beyond the people coming at me and I was looking for the gates. I was looking for the gates. The problem with Christianity is sometimes all we see is what's right in front of our nose. We see that how much easier it is to bow down to the idol. We see how much easier it is to express fear at the stones or the furnace when God says, listen, there's so much more. There's so much more. There's so much more. There's so much more.